Who was Ru? Generation 16. Let's jump into the periodic table of history and let's look at geography. Here we have the 6,000 years of history in the periodic table of history, 4000 BC to 2000 AD. I'm over here in the United States, so we'll go from the United States over here to Israel, and then we'll go back in time with our time machine and visit Ru. So let's click in here and zoom in to where Ru is. That's him. I'm going to paint him yellow. We'll be able to see him a little bit easier this way. Geographically, he's known to be in this area of the Euphrates River. I'll point out that the flood was right here. Also, I'm going to bring an arrow out to the time when Ru was born and the time when Ru died. Some interesting connections about this. Noah lived from 3060 to 2110 BC. 2110 BC is going to be right here. And therefore, when we're looking at Ru, this yellow bar, out of all these patriarchs, he's one of the people that was around to see Noah's death. All the while, most of the other patriarchs are still alive here. So seeing where Noah is one connection that's very interesting as far as the lifetime of Ru. And then another connection is that Abraham is right here. Abraham lives a little past 2000 BC, whereas Ru dies a little before 2000 BC. So Ru was around when Abraham was born and when Abraham was a little boy. He dies before the birth of Ishmael, but still would have known a lot about the life of Abraham. Now, just in review, we have Arphaxad. We know absolutely where he is. And Selah and Eber are more elusive. We know where Peleg is, and we know where Ru is. Now you can see the life bars in relation to 3000 BC to 2000 BC. These other life bars are the other patriarchs. It states in Genesis 11, "And Eber lived 34 years and begat Peleg. And Eber lived after he begat Peleg 430 years and begat sons and daughters. And Peleg lived 30 years and begat Ru. And Peleg lived after he begat Ru 209 years and begat sons and daughters." The Akkadians knew Ru as Ra'u. Now the Greeks rendered the name Ra-Gau. So perhaps he liked spaghetti, who knows? Now let's look at the decreasing lifespan after the flood and check out Ru. Peleg, that's Ru's father, lives 239 years. Ru also lives 239 years. Genetics have come to an equilibrium point, 2329 BC or somewhere around there. The dates are non-calibrated dates using the book of Genesis and connecting them to the founding of the Temple of Solomon. It'd be interesting if we had some samples, if we could study genetics at this time. But alas, all we know are these dates. It's probably in the lifespan of Ru that people start to come to realize the importance of records. And we know that there was the confounding of the language just before this, at the time of Peleg. Noah dies towards the end of Ru's life, right here. And therefore writing gets a whole lot more complex at this time because there's the confusion of languages and the nations are dividing out into their civilizations. I'm going to put another marker here at the life of Peleg because we remember that in his life the nations were divided. Now I'm going to take my stab at the sequence here. The patriarchs get off the ark and find prime land and search the ruins of the pre-flood artifacts on the plain of Shinar between the Tigris and Euphrates River. The people start building small tent villages in this region, and as Noah is getting older, he starts thinking he needs to give out the family will. Now the people start building more and more permanent settlements in this plain of Shinar. So Noah has a great meeting where everyone learns their true inheritance. Some people didn't like their allotment and they start a rebellion. The people decide to build the Tower of Babel. We can zoom very far out here and still get the idea of the very important center of the plain of Shinar. The dispersion of land happens at the birth of Peleg. The book of Sothis places the Tower of Babel event 5 years after the birth of Peleg. And Peleg has his first child named Ru after the Tower of Babel event. Let's read more in Genesis 11. And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, Go to, let us make brick, and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. So I came across an interesting story of Noah in the book of Jubilees, chapter 8. Okay, pay attention here. This is talking about Noah. And he called his sons, and they drew nigh to him, they and their children. And he divided the earth into the lots, which his 3 sons were to take in possession. And they reached forth their hands, and took the writing out of the bosom of Noah, their father. So these are the mountains of Ararat. And as we sojourn to the east, and then we find our plain of Shinar over here, where everyone's building their cities. Family will is given out. And 3 spots are marked. And here's the family inheritance. You have Shem, Ham, and Japheth over here. But in reality, everyone is right here. They have been working for about 100 years to build up these cities. We can go to the periodic table of history and look at this. Ever since the flood happened up here, we have 100 years until we get down into here. Even though we start off with not very many people, the population is exploding, and this land of Shinar is exploding with building projects. The map in the book of Jubilees sets out a land that looks something like this. The world is divided into 3 segments. One is this massive and wealthy land chunk called Africa. That's Ham's allotment. Then we have Japheth's allotment, is this tiny little peninsula over here, laden with all these seas. We have a huge ice cap up here. Probably the ice age has started after the flood. A whole lot of this area is going to start being inundated with ice. And then Shem got this other allotment, this super wealthy area all across Asia. I don't know the exact dividing lines. We do remember what Noah said about Japheth and Shem. Blessed be the God of Shem, and also Japheth will dwell in the tents of Shem. So Japheth gets this tiny little place in Europe. Shem gets this massive, wealthy area of a lot of Asia. And then Ham gets this extraordinarily wealthy area of Africa. All this land, all this area to spread out to. And of course, when I was thinking on this, I wondered at what the square footage was of each of these 3 places. This tiny little triangle of Europe is 3.9 million square miles. Now, Africa, look at that huge sucker. And remember, this didn't used to be a desert. The Sahara Desert is only about 4,500 years old. Isn't that coincidental since the flood happened 4,500 years ago? Egypt used to be the breadbasket of the world. So this was not a desert, this was a thriving area, agricultural center of the world. And look at that massive continent. So much land. Africa is 11.7 million square miles. Just considering Europe, Africa is 3 times as large as Europe. You can take Europe and put it in Africa 3 times. Asia is 17.2 million square miles. This continent is huge. So you can see that it's a good thing that Japheth is dwelling within the tents of Shem. And we can see that with most of the lakes and the ice up here, it was inevitable for Japheth to become a sea power. Despite the floods that could come from the Black Sea or the Mediterranean Sea and this break through the Strait of Gibraltar, it was just inevitable that Japheth become a sea power. So here becomes the prototype dysfunctional family of the earth. So when you get to heaven, Ru can tell you all about it. Now remember that everyone has been building in this area for 100 years. There are pre-flood cities in this area, like Eridu, and there are post-flood cities in this area, like Akkad and Uruk. So Ham and Japheth have just been told that they're getting booted off of that land, and they're going to have to go off to their allotted sections of land. Do you see a problem happening with covetousness here? Because if you've ever gone through a death in the family and an inheritance, you get to see the worst in people. So we can get back to Genesis chapter 11, verse 4. And they said, "Go to, let us build us a city and a tower whose top may reach unto heaven. And let us make a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." Okay, did you just get that? Did you just get that? Everyone's right here. Everyone is now filled with covetousness. The 3 sons of Noah have grabbed the scrolls and then also distributed the land out to all of the sons and the grandsons and the great-great-grandsons. And they're really not happy about it. The table is set for this rebellion. It's just human nature for this to happen. And what would you do if somebody just said, "Hey, guess what? You're getting booted off your land, and your land that you've been working at for the last 100 years goes to Shem." So of course the people start building a tower right here in the middle of this area. And remember, that's not the tower, that's just a marker. Now let's go on to Genesis 11, verse 5. "And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the children of men builded. And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of the earth. The inheritance is distributed here at the beginning of the life of Peleg, Tower of Babel, 5 years after the birth of Peleg. Ru grew up in this new land. And over here you can see this mess of a power struggle where everybody's in the same plane, very close in proximity to each other. And who knows if one person has a famine, if another person has good fortune with their harvest. So there are a lot of problems with resources right here. Now what I'm going to do is back out here. Let's see how the descendants shake out. Let's see the sons of Japheth. Also, let's see the sons of Shem. And finally, let's see the sons of Ham. Remember our boundary line drawn by Noah? It goes right around here up the Red Sea, over the Mediterranean, up to the Caspian Sea, and then out to the Great Mountain Range. Some of this shakes out okay, like we know that Madai of the Medes bartered for a piece of land in Shem's territory. And we also see the Lydians over here in Anatolia or Turkey. So that could be just a swap. I don't want to be here, let's trade places. Madai was also intertwined with Asher. So that was arranged, but then we look down here and we see that the Hamites didn't do as well in distributing themselves all around. Anything over here in Saudi Arabia is on the Shem side of the allotment. So we see a lot of character of Cush. I'm supposing that Cush didn't take the news very well that he had to leave the site of Mesopotamia, because we see Nimrod as the one that starts the rebellion. Now also think about Canaan. This whole land is the allotment of Shem, but Canaan sets up right here along the Mediterranean. Look at how many of his sons are out here. They're all here in light blue. Heth is all the way up here by Tarshish, and so is in the land of Japheth. So here there's a three-way collision. Down here you see a two-way collision. You can see some of the sons of Aram here crossing over in this land that, according to the distribution by Noah, is to go to Shem. So Hol and Gether are over here. Shem also, and Abraham eventually comes down here in this area. But we see all these Canaanites that, instead of going this way, decided they would set up right here in the land of Shem. So this is extraordinary. Fast forwarding to today, we see that Turkey is a loss for Japheth, and Iran is a loss for Shem. And the land of Canaan becomes a three-way debacle. And the whole thing is due to covetousness. Now remember the 10 Commandments. They say, "Thou shalt not covet." Well, Ru grew up in a chaotic time when most of all the people are in rebellion. It is the true land of confusion. We still see this stress today. I'll leave you with a quote from Shakespeare in Macbeth. "Security is mortal's chiefest enemy." So isn't this exciting? We have the groundwork for everything that happens hereafter in world history. And now we can see how history is woven together. So I want to thank you for watching. It's always free to subscribe, thumbs up, share, and comment. And I will see you in the next video. Have a great week.